The fastest way to discover what family is truly worth is to lose everything money can buy. That thought never crossed my daughter-in-law Vanessa's mind during the years she spent chasing success, status, and the approval of people who only admired her when she appeared to be winning. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I am 68 years old, a widow, a mother, and a grandmother. For most of my life, I believed that character revealed itself not during celebrations but during disappointments. Looking back now, I realize that the lesson which changed Vanessa's life began long before she lost $35 million overnight. It began on an ordinary spring afternoon in Connecticut, when our family gathered for Sunday lunch at my late husband's estate. The property sat on nearly 20 acres of rolling green lawns and old oak trees. It had been in the family for decades, and although it was beautiful, I never viewed it as a symbol of wealth. To me, it was simply home. Vanessa arrived that afternoon in a brand new luxury SUV, stepping out with the confidence of someone convinced she had everything figured out. At 40 years old, she was polished, ambitious, and admired in all the right social circles. Her designer handbag matched her shoes perfectly. Her smile was flawless. Her social media followers adored her lifestyle. People often described her as successful. What they rarely noticed was how uncomfortable she became around anything that could not be measured in dollars. As everyone settled around the long dining table, conversations drifted between business, travel plans, and local events. Vanessa naturally became the center of attention. She spoke about investment opportunities, exclusive conferences, and the impressive returns she expected from several projects. My son listened proudly. Other relatives nodded with admiration. I listened quietly. Experience had taught me that confidence and certainty were not always the same thing. During dessert, my granddaughter Lily walked into the room carrying a handmade card she had spent all morning creating. She was only 9 years old and incredibly proud of it. The card was covered in colorful drawings of flowers, hearts, and family portraits. She handed it to Vanessa with a bright smile. "I made this for you," she said. Vanessa thanked her politely and glanced at the card for barely 2 seconds before placing it beside her phone. Then she immediately returned to discussing investment strategies with the adults. Lily's smile faded. Most people at the table never noticed. I did. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I found Lily sitting on the back porch swing. She looked disappointed. When I asked what was wrong, she shrugged and said, "Maybe grown-ups like expensive things more than homemade things." Her words stayed with me. Children often see truths adults miss. A few days later, Vanessa appeared in a magazine article highlighting her financial success. The headline praised her business instincts and called her one of the most influential women in her industry. Friends congratulated her. Investors sought her advice. Invitations arrived constantly. From the outside, her future looked unstoppable. Yet beneath all the recognition, something important was missing. She had built a life centered on achievements but had slowly overlooked the people who loved her without conditions. At the time, none of us knew how quickly life could change. None of us knew that within a matter of weeks, the fortune Vanessa trusted most would disappear. And none of us imagined that losing $35 million would become the beginning of the most valuable lesson she would ever learn. Over the next several weeks, Vanessa seemed to be everywhere. Her face appeared in business magazines, online interviews, and social events attended by entrepreneurs and investors from across the country. Every time I turned on the television or opened a newspaper, there was another story celebrating her latest achievement. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who believed the future was completely under her control. At family gatherings, conversations increasingly revolved around her projects. She spoke enthusiastically about market trends, growth opportunities, and ambitious expansion plans. Everyone listened. Some were impressed. Others simply assumed that success would continue indefinitely. I remained quiet. Life had shown me too many seasons to mistake a sunny day for a permanent climate. One Saturday afternoon, Vanessa invited several family members to a charity gala she was sponsoring in Manhattan. The event was elegant and carefully organized. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the ballroom. Guests arrived in formal attire. Photographers moved through the crowd capturing every carefully crafted moment. Vanessa looked completely at ease. She greeted donors, spoke with reporters, and posed for photographs with influential business leaders. From a distance, she appeared to have mastered every aspect of success. Yet while watching her, I noticed something that many others overlooked. Nearly every conversation eventually returned to money, recognition, or professional accomplishments. Genuine curiosity about other people seemed increasingly rare. During dinner, a guest asked Vanessa what achievement made her most proud. Without hesitation, she described a recent investment deal that had generated millions of dollars in returns. The room applauded politely. Then the same guest asked if there was a mentor who had shaped her values. Vanessa paused for a moment before giving a brief answer and quickly steering the conversation back toward business. Something about that exchange lingered in my mind. Success was not the problem. Forgetting the people who helped you reach it often was. A few days later, I received a call from Lily's school. Grandparents were invited to attend a student appreciation afternoon. I happily agreed. As I sat among dozens of families, I watched children present small projects about the people they admired most. When Lily stepped onto the stage, she held up a poster filled with photographs, drawings, and handwritten notes. To my surprise, she had included both me and Vanessa. After the presentations ended, I asked her why. Lily smiled and said, "Grandma, I know Mom works really hard. I just wish she had more time." The innocence in her voice was heartbreaking. She did not want expensive gifts or luxury vacations. She wanted attention. She wanted presence. She wanted connection. That evening, I called Vanessa and suggested that she spend a weekend away from work with her family. She laughed warmly and promised she would try after an upcoming financial conference in Chicago. Then another meeting appeared on her calendar. Then another. The weekend never happened. Summer arrived, bringing record highs in both temperature and financial markets. Vanessa's investments continued to grow. Investors praised her judgment. Articles described her as visionary. Opportunities multiplied faster than she could accept them. Yet alongside the praise came increasing pressure. More money was committed. More expectations were created. More risk quietly accumulated beneath the surface. One evening, as the sun set behind the oak trees outside my home, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and reflected on everything unfolding around us. The air was calm. The sky glowed with shades of orange and gold. It felt peaceful. Yet deep inside, I sensed a storm approaching. Not because I possess special knowledge about markets or investments. I simply understood a truth that life teaches eventually to everyone. When people begin believing they cannot lose, they often stop noticing what they already have. And somewhere far beyond our family dinners, magazine covers, and social events, circumstances were already beginning to shift in ways none of us could yet see. The first sign of trouble arrived quietly on a Tuesday morning. Most people never notice the beginning of a major change because it rarely announces itself with dramatic warnings. Instead, it starts with small conversations, concerned phone calls, and headlines that seem easy to ignore. Vanessa was preparing for another investor meeting when reports began circulating about unexpected instability in several sectors connected to her largest positions. At first, she remained confident. Market fluctuations were common. Corrections happened. Temporary setbacks were part of investing. She assured everyone around her that there was nothing to worry about. For a few days, her confidence appeared justified. Then the situation worsened. News outlets began reporting deeper problems. Investors grew nervous. Prices started falling faster than analysts expected. By the end of the week, uncertainty had spread across financial markets nationwide. I learned about most of it through television reports and newspaper articles. Although I had spent many years around business and finance, I understood that panic rarely helped anyone. So I continued my normal routine. I tended my garden, volunteered at a local literacy program, and spent time with Lily whenever possible. One afternoon, while helping her plant flowers near the front walkway, she asked a question that caught me off guard. "Grandma, why do grown-ups worry so much about money?" I smiled gently. "Because money can solve some problems," I answered. "But people sometimes forget that it cannot solve all of them." She thought about that for a moment before returning to her flowers. Children often absorb wisdom more naturally than adults. Meanwhile, Vanessa's schedule became increasingly chaotic. Meetings multiplied. Emergency conference calls filled her calendar. Several planned appearances were cancelled without explanation. Family dinners became rare. When she did attend, she seemed distracted, constantly checking messages on her phone. My son noticed it too. One evening he mentioned that she had barely slept for days. Even then, neither of them shared the full extent of what was happening. They still believed the situation could be contained. Then came the night everything changed. A series of developments triggered a wave of selling across several investments heavily connected to Vanessa's portfolio. By sunrise, losses had accelerated beyond anyone's expectations. Financial networks covered the story continuously. Analysts debated causes and consequences. Investors demanded answers. Phones rang non-stop. Messages poured in. The numbers were difficult to comprehend. Years of accumulated gains disappeared with shocking speed. By the following evening, estimates suggested that nearly $35 million connected to Vanessa's positions had vanished. The woman who had seemed unstoppable only weeks earlier suddenly found herself facing a reality she had never seriously imagined. Yet what struck me most was not the financial loss itself. It was the silence that followed. People who once called daily stopped reaching out. Invitations disappeared. Several professional relationships cooled almost overnight. The attention that had surrounded her during success began fading. Public admiration proved far less loyal than genuine friendship. A few days later, I was sitting on my porch reading when an unfamiliar car pulled into the driveway. I looked up and immediately recognized Vanessa stepping out. She was dressed simply, without the polished confidence that usually accompanied her. In one hand she carried a small bakery box. In the other was a bouquet of fresh flowers. For a moment, she stood beside the car as though gathering the courage to walk forward. Then she slowly approached the front door. As I watched her, I sensed something important was happening. Not because she had lost money. Many people lose money and learn nothing. What mattered was the expression in her eyes. For the first time since I had known her, she did not look like someone trying to impress the world. She looked like someone searching for something she could not buy. I opened the door and welcomed Vanessa inside without asking questions. Sometimes people reveal more when they are given space instead of interrogation. She handed me the flowers and the bakery box with a nervous smile. For a few moments, neither of us mentioned money, business, or the headlines that had dominated the news cycle for days. We sat in the sunroom overlooking the gardens while I poured tea. The familiar quiet seemed to make her uncomfortable at first. She glanced around the room as though searching for the right words. Finally, she took a deep breath. "I do not really know why I came here first," she admitted. I stirred my tea gently and smiled. "Perhaps because you already know the answer." Vanessa looked down at her hands. The confidence that had once filled every conversation was gone. In its place was uncertainty. Not the uncertainty of markets or business forecasts, but the uncertainty that comes when a person begins questioning the foundation of their own choices. For the next hour she spoke more honestly than I had ever heard before. She talked about the pressure she had placed on herself to succeed. She talked about constantly comparing herself to other people. She talked about how every achievement seemed satisfying for only a short time before she felt compelled to chase another one. As she spoke, I realized something important. The loss of money had not created her pain. It had simply exposed pain that had been growing quietly for years. Before leaving, she thanked me for listening. There was no request for financial help. No hidden agenda. Just gratitude. That surprised me. During the following week, something even more surprising happened. Vanessa began showing up in places where she had rarely appeared before. She attended one of Lily's after-school art exhibits and stayed for the entire event. She sat beside other parents and grandparents instead of checking her phone every few minutes. When Lily proudly showed her a watercolor painting, Vanessa studied every detail and asked questions about how it had been made. The smile on Lily's face was impossible to miss. A few days later, my son called me. His voice sounded lighter than it had in months. He told me that Vanessa had cancelled several non-essential commitments and spent an entire weekend at home with the family. They cooked meals together, played board games, and took long walks through a local park. Nothing about the weekend would have impressed a business magazine. Yet somehow it seemed more meaningful than many of the achievements that had once filled newspaper headlines. Even so, growth is rarely a straight line. There were difficult days. Vanessa still received calls related to financial problems. She still faced criticism from people who had once praised her. There were moments when frustration and embarrassment resurfaced. But instead of hiding behind polished answers, she gradually began confronting reality with honesty. One Saturday morning she joined me at a community literacy center where I volunteered. We spent several hours helping children improve their reading skills. On the drive home, she was unusually quiet. Finally, she said something I never expected to hear. "I spent years trying to be admired by strangers," she said softly. "I never realized how little time I invested in the people who already cared about me." I looked out the window at the passing trees and smiled. Wisdom often arrives disguised as regret. The important thing is recognizing it before it is too late. As autumn approached and the leaves began changing colors across New England, our family slowly settled into a different rhythm. The financial storm had not completely passed, but something else had started to emerge. For the first time in many years, Vanessa seemed less concerned with protecting her image and more concerned with rebuilding relationships. And although neither of us spoke about it directly, I could see that she was beginning to discover a truth that no amount of wealth could teach on its own. By late October, the air had turned crisp across Connecticut, and the maple trees surrounding the estate were painted in shades of red and gold. Change was visible everywhere, and in many ways, the same could be said for Vanessa. The transformation was not dramatic enough to attract headlines, nor was it the kind that could be measured on a financial statement. It revealed itself through small decisions repeated day after day. She began attending family dinners consistently. She volunteered at community events without posting photographs online. She listened more than she spoke. Most importantly, she started rebuilding trust one conversation at a time. Trust, I had learned long ago, is much like a garden. It grows slowly, requires patience, and cannot be rushed simply because someone suddenly wishes for results. One evening, our family gathered at my home for dinner. The dining room was filled with familiar sounds of laughter, clinking glasses, and overlapping conversations. Lily sat beside Vanessa, eagerly describing a science project she had been working on for weeks. In the past, Vanessa might have nodded politely while checking messages on her phone. This time, she gave Lily her full attention. She asked thoughtful questions and listened carefully as her daughter explained every detail. Watching them together, I noticed a confidence in Lily that had been missing before. Children have an extraordinary ability to sense when they are truly being heard. After dinner, while everyone helped clear the table, my son pulled me aside. He smiled in a way I had not seen for a very long time. "Things are different," he said quietly. "Not perfect, but different." I nodded. Sometimes those are the most meaningful victories. A few days later, Vanessa asked if she could join me during one of my volunteer sessions at the literacy center. We spent the morning helping children practice reading aloud. One young boy struggled with confidence and frequently apologized whenever he made a mistake. Vanessa gently encouraged him to keep trying. By the end of the session, he was smiling and reading entire pages without hesitation. As we walked back to the parking lot, Vanessa seemed deeply moved. I spent years believing success meant being the smartest person in the room, she said. Today I realized it might mean helping someone else believe in themselves. Her words stayed with me. Growth often begins when a person stops asking how much they can gain and starts asking how much they can give. As Thanksgiving approached, our family prepared for the holiday together. Vanessa volunteered to organize much of the gathering. At first, I wondered whether old habits might return. For years she had treated events like opportunities to impress people. This time was different. She focused on making everyone feel welcome. She involved the grandchildren in decorating. She asked relatives about their lives. She even spent hours in the kitchen learning several family recipes that had been passed down through generations. During dinner, each person shared something they were grateful for. When it was Vanessa's turn, the room became quiet. She looked around the table before speaking. A year ago, I would have talked about accomplishments, she said. Today I am grateful for second chances. I am grateful for patience. And I am grateful for the people who stayed in my life when there was nothing impressive left to offer. No one spoke for a moment. Then Lily reached over and squeezed her mother's hand. It was a simple gesture, but it carried more meaning than any award or recognition Vanessa had ever received. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and the dishes were finally put away, I stood by the window looking out at the moonlit lawn. Vanessa joined me, and for a while we simply enjoyed the silence. Neither of us mentioned the money she had lost. The subject seemed far less important now. What mattered was that she had begun discovering something many people spend their entire lives searching for. She was learning that value does not come from what a person owns. It comes from the relationships they nurture, the kindness they share, and the time they willingly give to those they love. Winter arrived quietly in Connecticut. Snow covered the lawns of the Whitmore estate, and the oak trees stood bare against pale gray skies. Inside the house, however, there was a warmth that had been missing for years. Family dinners had become regular again. Conversations lasted longer. Laughter came more naturally. And Vanessa, once constantly distracted by her phone and business pressures, was now fully present in the moments that mattered. The financial consequences of her losses had not disappeared. She still faced difficult meetings with advisors, restructuring plans, and the painful process of rebuilding her professional life. But something inside her had changed more profoundly than any bank balance could show. One afternoon in December, Vanessa arrived at my house carrying a stack of old photo albums. I found these in storage, she said with a soft smile. We spent hours sitting by the fireplace, turning pages filled with family vacations, birthday parties, school plays, and holiday gatherings from decades past. Some photographs included my late husband, whose steady presence still seemed to fill the room even after all these years. Vanessa lingered over one particular photo of Lily as a toddler, sitting on my husband's shoulders at a 4th of July picnic. I was probably checking emails when this was taken, she said quietly. I looked at her gently. The good news is that you still have time to make new memories. She nodded, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. Not tears of self-pity, but of realization. A few days before Christmas, Vanessa surprised the family with an idea. Instead of exchanging expensive gifts, she proposed that everyone spend the holiday doing something meaningful together. At first, a few relatives seemed skeptical. Our family had long been accustomed to elaborate presents and grand celebrations. But Vanessa insisted gently. I think we have enough things, she said. What we do not have enough of is time together. On Christmas Eve, we volunteered at a local shelter serving meals to families in need. The grandchildren helped decorate cookies. My son poured coffee for guests. Vanessa spent hours talking with people, listening to their stories, and helping children with craft activities. There were no cameras, no publicity, and no business connections to be made. It was simply an act of service. Later that night, as we returned home through softly falling snow, Lily slipped her hand into her mother's and said, "This was my favorite Christmas ever." Vanessa squeezed her hand tightly. In that moment, I realized how much she had grown. The woman who once measured value through luxury and status was now discovering joy in generosity, connection, and shared experiences. After the holidays, she began speaking openly with Lily about money in a way she never had before. She explained that wealth could be useful, but it should never become a person's identity. She talked about mistakes, humility, and the importance of treating people with kindness regardless of their status. One evening, I overheard Lily asking her mother, "Are we poor now?" Vanessa smiled and shook her head. "No, sweetheart. We are still rich in the ways that matter most." Those words carried a wisdom that could not have been purchased at any price. As the months passed, Vanessa slowly rebuilt parts of her career, but with a completely different approach. She became more selective about projects. She prioritized integrity over image. She invested time in mentoring young professionals instead of competing for attention. Most importantly, she protected family time as carefully as she once protected financial opportunities. One snowy evening, she sat beside me on the porch wrapped in a thick wool blanket. The world around us was quiet except for the gentle sound of wind through the trees. "I used to think losing $35 million was the worst thing that could happen to me," she said. "Now I think it may have saved me from losing something far more important." I looked out across the snow-covered lawn and smiled. Some lessons arrive gently. Others arrive through storms. But the ones that truly change us usually teach the same truth in the end: money can build a comfortable life, but only love, humility, and family can build a meaningful one. Spring arrived slowly after a long New England winter. The snow melted from the estate grounds, revealing green grass and flower beds that had patiently waited beneath the frozen earth. I often thought people were not very different. Sometimes growth happened quietly beneath the surface long before anyone else could see it. By March, Vanessa had settled into a new routine that would have seemed unimaginable a year earlier. Her mornings no longer began with checking financial markets before sunrise. Instead, she ate breakfast with her family whenever possible. She drove Lily to school several days each week and used the drive to talk about classes, friendships, and future dreams. The change was not dramatic enough to attract public attention, but it transformed the atmosphere within the family. One Saturday afternoon, Lily invited several friends to the estate for a small birthday celebration. It was not an extravagant event. There were balloons, homemade desserts, outdoor games, and a picnic beneath the old oak trees. As I watched the children run across the lawn, I noticed Vanessa sitting on a blanket helping them decorate cupcakes. She laughed freely, unconcerned about appearances or status. At one point, frosting ended up on her sleeve, and the children burst into laughter. The old Vanessa would have worried about looking polished. This Vanessa laughed right along with them. Later that day, Lily wrapped her arms around her mother and whispered something that brought tears to Vanessa's eyes. When I asked what had happened, Vanessa smiled and said she told me this was her favorite birthday because I was really here. Those simple words carried more weight than any professional award she had ever received. A few weeks later, Vanessa was invited to speak at a business leadership conference. In previous years, she would have eagerly accepted every opportunity to discuss growth strategies and financial success. This invitation was different. The organizers wanted her to share lessons learned from adversity. When she stepped onto the stage, the audience expected a presentation about markets and investments. Instead, she spoke about humility, priorities, and the danger of building self-worth entirely around achievement. She described how easy it was to become so focused on reaching the next goal that relationships gradually slipped into the background. The room listened in complete silence. Afterward, dozens of attendees approached her. Surprisingly, very few wanted investment advice. Most wanted to discuss family, balance, and the pressure to appear successful at all times. On the drive home, Vanessa called me. "I think people are tired," she said thoughtfully. "They spend so much energy trying to prove their value that they forget they already have value." I smiled because she had finally discovered a truth that many people spend decades chasing. As the months passed, she continued mentoring young professionals. Rather than teaching them how to maximize profits, she often emphasized character, responsibility, and perspective. She encouraged them to pursue excellence without sacrificing the people who mattered most. Some listened politely. Others seemed genuinely changed by her message. One evening in early May, our entire family gathered on the back porch to watch the sunset. The sky glowed with soft shades of orange and pink as birds drifted across the horizon. Conversation flowed easily between generations. No one was in a hurry to leave. No one was distracted by phones or schedules. At one point, my son looked around the group and said, "I cannot remember the last time things felt this peaceful." Neither could I. Vanessa sat quietly beside Lily, who rested her head on her mother's shoulder. There was a calm confidence about her now, different from the ambition that had once defined her. It was the confidence of someone who no longer needed constant validation from the outside world. As I watched my family together, I realized that the greatest recovery had never been financial. It was relational. Trust had been rebuilt. Time had been reclaimed. Priorities had been reordered. And in the process, Vanessa had gained something far more valuable than what she had lost. She had found her way back to the people who loved her not because of what she owned, but because of who she was becoming. By the time summer returned to Connecticut, nearly a year had passed since the events that had changed our family forever. The gardens around the estate were once again in full bloom, and the familiar rhythm of life had settled comfortably around us. Looking back, it was remarkable how much could change in 12 months. Not because circumstances had become perfect, but because the people within those circumstances had changed. One warm Saturday morning, our family gathered for a reunion picnic on the estate grounds. Relatives arrived carrying homemade dishes, folding chairs, and stories to share. Children raced across the lawn while grandparents sat beneath the shade of the old oak trees. It was the kind of gathering that would never appear in a magazine, yet somehow it felt richer than any event money could have created. Vanessa moved through the crowd greeting relatives, helping set tables, and making sure everyone felt included. There was nothing forced about her kindness anymore. It had become part of who she was. As the afternoon continued, several younger family members asked her questions about business and investing. They still admired her professional experience, but now they were equally interested in the wisdom she had gained through hardship. Vanessa answered honestly. She spoke about mistakes she had made, lessons she had learned, and the importance of defining success carefully. Money is a tool, she told them. It can open doors and create opportunities. But if you build your entire identity around it, you will always be afraid of losing it. The younger relatives listened closely. I could see that her words carried weight because they came from experience rather than theory. Later in the afternoon, Lily approached me carrying a small notebook. She had recently started writing essays for school and wanted to show me one she had completed. The title was simple, "The Most Important Lesson I Learned from My Family." I sat down beneath a tree and began reading. The essay described how people sometimes chase things they think will make them happy, only to discover that happiness was already waiting for them in the relationships they neglected. She wrote about forgiveness, second chances, and spending time with the people who matter most. Near the end, she included a sentence that made me pause. Real wealth is having people who love you when you have a good day and when you have a bad one. For a moment, I simply stared at the page. Then I looked across the lawn toward Vanessa. She was laughing with family members while helping a group of children organize a game. The contrast between who she had been and who she had become was impossible to ignore. As the sun began setting, everyone gathered for photographs. We stood together on the lawn, 3 generations of family surrounded by the home that had witnessed so many seasons of joy, sorrow, mistakes, and growth. After the pictures were taken, Vanessa walked over and handed me a framed photograph she had prepared in advance. It showed our family gathered around the Thanksgiving table several months earlier. Smiles filled every face. On the back of the frame, she had written a short message in careful handwriting. "Thank you for teaching me that the people around the table matter more than what is on it." I felt tears fill my eyes as I read the words. Not because they were dramatic, but because they were true. As evening settled over the estate and the last guests prepared to leave, I reflected on everything our family had experienced. Some people spend their entire lives searching for meaning in success, status, or possessions. Yet the greatest treasures are often the ones that cannot be counted, purchased, or displayed. They are found in forgiveness, gratitude, loyalty, and love. And sometimes, when life strips away what we thought mattered most, it gives us the chance to discover what truly does. Several months after our family reunion, life continued moving forward in the quiet, ordinary way that often brings the greatest happiness. There were school events to attend, birthdays to celebrate, gardens to maintain, and family dinners that stretched long into the evening. Nothing about these moments would have attracted public attention, yet they became the memories we treasured most. One Sunday afternoon, as autumn returned once again to Connecticut, I found myself sitting on the same porch where so many important conversations had taken place. The air was cool and golden leaves drifted slowly across the lawn. Vanessa joined me carrying 2 cups of tea. We sat together in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching Lily and several cousins play near the oak trees. Finally, Vanessa smiled and shook her head softly. If someone had told me 2 years ago that this would become my favorite way to spend an afternoon, I would not have believed them. I laughed gently. Life has a way of teaching lessons we never expected to learn. She nodded. The strange thing is that I thought I had everything figured out back then. I believed success meant being admired, being important, and always moving toward the next achievement. I was so focused on building a future that I forgot to appreciate the people already standing beside me. Her words reflected a truth many people discover only after experiencing disappointment. Sometimes the things we pursue most aggressively are not the things we need most deeply. As the sun slowly lowered toward the horizon, I thought about the journey our family had taken. We had experienced loss, uncertainty, regret, forgiveness, and growth. Through it all, one lesson remained constant. The value of a life cannot be measured by the size of a bank account, the title on a business card, or the applause of strangers. Those things can change overnight. Markets rise and fall. Careers evolve. Circumstances shift. What endures are the relationships we build and the character we develop along the way. A few weeks later, Lily received an assignment at school asking students to write about a person who had influenced them. When she proudly shared her essay with the family, she surprised everyone by choosing her mother. In the essay, she did not describe business accomplishments or financial success. Instead, she wrote about kindness, honesty, and the courage to change. She wrote about a mother who learned from her mistakes and became stronger because of them. As Vanessa read the essay aloud, tears filled her eyes. Not because it praised her, but because it reflected the person she had worked so hard to become. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I placed the essay beside several family photographs and spent a few moments reflecting. Life rarely unfolds according to our plans. There are seasons of prosperity and seasons of challenge. There are moments when we gain things and moments when we lose them. Yet every experience offers an opportunity to learn what truly matters. The greatest lesson from our family's story was never about money. It was about perspective. It was about understanding that success without relationships feels empty, while love, trust, and gratitude create a richness that cannot be taken away. It was about recognizing that second chances are valuable gifts and that people can grow when they are willing to face their shortcomings with honesty and humility. Most of all, it was a reminder that family is not measured by perfection. Family is measured by presence, patience, forgiveness, and commitment. In the end, the things that brought the deepest joy were not the things money had purchased. They were the conversations shared around a dinner table, the laughter of children playing on a summer afternoon, the comfort of knowing someone cared, and the quiet certainty that no matter what happened in the outside world, we belonged to one another. And that kind of wealth is worth more than anything money could ever buy. Please like and subscribe.